Dragi gledateljice i dragi gledatelji, dobrodošli. Ja sam Ines Žižić, a vi gledate Atma podcast. Moj današnji gost mi se pridružuje online, a on je Sal Rachele, međunarodno poznati učitelj s 45 godina iskustva na području osobnog razvoja i duhovnosti, mistik, iscijelitelj, predavač i autor. Posebno je zanimljiv podatak da je Sal Rachele kanalizator koji posjeduje svojevrsnu sposobnost vidovitosti. U svojim knjigama tako opisuje kontakte s bićima iz viših dimenzija, čije poruke i znanja kanalizira te zapisuje. Sal Rachele je do sada objavio 7 knjiga, svih 7 je prevedeno i na hrvatski i svih 7 možete nabaviti u našem Atma web shopu. Sal također vodi brojne radionice i seminare diljem svijeta, a povod ovog podcasta je Salova nadolazeća europska proljetna turneja u sklopu koje će posjetiti i našu regiju. Pa krenimo! Sal, welcome to our Atma podcast. I'm very much honored to have you here and have this conversation with you.
Well, it's my pleasure to be a part of this. Thank you very much.
As I already said in my announcement, soon you are coming to this region and you will have some interesting events here, some seminars. So everything about that we will put in the description of this podcast and also on our Atma portal. And this is, a perfect opportunity for our viewers to get to know you a little bit more, about your work, about your mission, about your books, techniques, seminars. And before we go into the topics of your books, seminars, and spiritual techniques, I want to ask you about the channeling thing. You channel your spirit guides and various beings from another dimensions, and you put those messages, those knowledge in your books. You put it in your seminars, in your techniques. First of all, I want to ask you, how did you discover this ability? It's ability, of course. You see things which others cannot see. You hear things which others cannot hear. How did you find that you have this ability? How do you receive those messages? Also, how do you authentify those messages, from whom they are? Are they true? Are they authentic? And of course, the most important question is, who are these entities?
Okay, so I started back in the 1970s, and you could say I started in past lives. I had a lot of prior knowledge that I brought with me into this life, but that's neither here nor there. What's here is, in the 1970s, I took the Silva method and used that as my boost or my catalyst for developing my psychic and intuitive abilities. And I used to sit out outside my balcony in the Silicon Valley of California, and I would receive downloads of information from higher levels. Now, at the time, I didn't have too many specific beings, although there was one being who identified himself later as Lord Sananda, the Oversoul of Jesus, which he called the living Christ energies at the time. That was what I could understand. But it wasn't until the late 1980s that my personal spirit guide, Leah, came to me while I was meditating on a vortex in Sedona, Arizona. And she came to me very softly and sweetly and reminded me who she was. And she is my twin flame in the higher dimensions, and we've been together throughout thousands of years, either physically on a world or etherically on a world, to be more accurate, or just simply working from the spirit realms to help souls on various planets. So she kind of just illuminated all of that for me. Now, this was in late 1980s. It wasn't until the 2000s that I actually started officially channeling. And the reason was, I was aware that there seems to be a lot of inaccurate channelings. There's people claiming to be in touch with so-and-so, and these beings are asking us to violate the free will of other human beings and things like that. So I didn't want to take a chance on my messages being distorted. So I waited until I had done more work on myself before I started putting out the messages publicly. And that was around 2004. So I've been doing this about 20 years formally with my spirit guides. And how do you tell if it's an authentic message or not? Well, you really have to do some work on yourself prior to establishing a channeling practice. This is just the reality of it. There are channels out there, perhaps trance channels, which some of them are very good trance channels, but trance channeling is not for me. I'm too much of a control freak. I have to know what's going on and be a participant in what's coming through. And so for that reason, I only do conscious channeling. But at any rate, I wanted to make sure my ego was not going to get in the way. So I do kind of put it to the test. And there's a few simple rules. Number one, higher beings always look across to us. They do not look down on us and think, oh, those poor human beings down there on that prison planet, you know, they're so lost and confused, blah, blah, blah. That's not how higher beings see us. They see us as magnificent beings of light, and we are an extended family. They are part of our family. They just don't happen to have physical bodies. That's the only real difference. And so when I'm working with them, I feel like I'm part of an extended family. And so the messages cannot be judgmental. They may make gentle suggestions on things we can do to improve our lives, but they're not going to order us around or tell us, you better do this or you better do that, or there are going to be bad consequences. We can already see the bad consequences of judgment and guilt and shame and all of these things. We don't need them to remind us of that unless they do it lovingly and gently, like, gosh, you seem to be awfully hard on yourself. Why don't you lighten up a little bit and remember that you're a beautiful, powerful, creative, spiritual being created in the image and likeness of God, and that God's love is pouring through you every moment of every day, whether or not you realize it. That's the type of messages that you get from truly higher beings.
Yes, but that leads me to the second question, because, of course, out there can be also some kind of negative beings, like, I don't know, evil, demonic beings, subtle beings. How the one can see if those creatures are good or bad, and how can we protect ourselves from the bad ones?
Well, up until a certain point in your level of vibration, you really do need to use protection, and there are various protection techniques. I have a couple of techniques which I've used extensively over the years. One is what I call 3 layers of golden light, where you imagine concentric rings of golden light around the aura, which let the good energies in and repel the bad energies. And then if you are actually under attack by negative entities, you can use brilliant white light and simply imagine you're pushing it out in all directions from the center of your being. And while you're doing that, remind yourself that God's love is what's real, that we are children of God, extensions of God. We are the hands, the eyes, the ears, the feet of God in this dimension. And we concentrate on radiating from the center of our being out into the world. So we're living life from the inside out. And it's like living at the top of a waterfall, and this golden light is cascading down the mountainside. And negative beings, they can't really climb up the waterfall to get to us when we're in our center, when we're radiating from our center. And the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between pretending and reality. So if you pretend that you're radiating from the center of your being, the subconscious mind says, okay, we're radiating from the center of our being, and it dispels entities very quickly. The other piece, which is a seminar unto itself, is that sometimes we have negative karmic contracts that we have not resolved with various beings from past lives or from other dimensions or the astral planes or wherever they are. And so we do have to, this is what I mean when I say we do have to do the inner work. We have to resolve our past life issues and our early childhood issues. And this is one of the reasons why my guides, the Arcturians, brought through the technique of timeline healing, which we can talk about later. But that's one of the methods for doing the inner work. And I'm not saying I've done all my inner work or that everyone else has done their inner work. Even the yogis high up in the mountains may not have done all their inner work. It's not for me to say. But you get to a point where your awareness of who you are is this vast, creative, intelligent being. And then you have this little human drama, which is like a bubble contained within your larger being. So true transcendence is about going beyond the human drama and simply seeing it as a part of you, a small part of you that's playing out a drama here on planet Earth.
Yes, thank you. That, of course, brings the next topic, which is about what is like the most essential questions which people ask themselves from the beginning of creation, like who am I? What is my true identity? Why do I live here? What is the purpose of life? Who is God? What is my connection with Him? What would you say your answers are to these questions?
I would say yes. These are the most important questions, and sometimes we have to start with the double negatives, who we are not, and then realize we are not the negatives in order to get to the positives. And so we have to start questioning everything, basically, especially our education. We grow up thinking we are individual human beings. We're identified with these material bodies that we're wearing. And we're identified with our personality. Oh, this is who I am. This is my role in life. These are my parents. These are my children, blah, blah, blah. And we become so identified with those roles that we really don't know who we are when we're caught in the matrix, as I like to call it. You know, the matrix is nothing more than the beliefs and structure of society. That's all it is. So we're taught to compete, we're taught to excel in school, get higher grades than the other children in the class and things like that. And of course, we identify with that. We start thinking, well, I am a scientist or an engineer or a teacher or a healer or a parent or a child. And we identify with the roles that we're playing and start thinking that's who we are. So we have to start there. And I know that a lot of the audience has heard this before, but it bears repeating because the subconscious mind likes repetition. So we have to constantly remind ourselves that who we really are. We're powerful, creative, spiritual beings, way beyond these physical bodies. These are just vehicles, like your car is just a vehicle. You know, you wouldn't say, I am my Volvo or I am my Mercedes-Benz, or, you know, that would be foolish. And yet the body is much more sophisticated than our automobile, but it's the same general idea. So we have to recognize we're not the body, we're not the personality or ego, that's not who we really are, and start investigating that statement. You know, some of you might be saying, well, how do I know I'm not that? Investigate it, explore it, meditate, learn different techniques of meditation, how to watch your thoughts. And you'll start to realize that there is something beyond your thoughts. It's not easy to find that something, or maybe I should say it's nothing, no thing, but that's a good place to start. You know, and then, of course, the question, who am I? That question, there's a seminar where all weekend people sit across from each other and say, tell me who you are. And in the beginning of the workshop, you know, there's all these clever answers. Oh, I'm a child of God, or I'm a 12-dimensional being, or I'm this, or I'm that. But by the end of the workshop, the mind starts to fall silent because it can't really describe who you are. It can only come up with labels. And I've come up with some very lofty labels when I say powerful, creative, spiritual being. It's helpful to have that label, to think I am this amazing being that has all these creative abilities. Even if it doesn't seem like I'm using my creative abilities in my everyday life, it doesn't mean I don't have them. So those are the places to start. You really do have to go deep into the existential questions. And because that's the nature of the questions, they force you to go deeper. Oh, you mean I'm not the labels, I'm not the words. If I say I am love, well, what does that mean? That's a word. It points to something beyond the word. It's a symbol of something. And so you maybe start there and say, oh, what does that mean, I am love? And so you feel the essence of what that statement means. And then you start to go deeper into who you are. That maybe you've just scratched the surface of who you are when you start to go beyond the words.
Thank you. But what about, okay, who we are? We can say kind of we are some kind of spirit, consciousness, eternal consciousness. But why are we here? What is the meaning of our existence? And in whom we are related to? Who is the creator? Who is the creator of all this experience?
There's several levels and dimensions to that question. Let's start with the idea that there is a creator that created everything, and that this creator is intimately involved in its creation, meaning that it's a holographic universe. Inside each part is the whole. The whole is contained in the parts. That's one aspect of holograms. And so there are physicists, scientists right now who are demonstrating that the entire universe exists inside every proton of every atom. So literally, the kingdom of heaven is within us, it says in the Bible. Literally, we are the creation manifest in these various forms. And we have trillions of cells with quadrillions of atoms in each cell and quintillions of protons, and each proton contains the entire universe. This is a difficult idea for the mind to try and grasp. So you could say we are God in that sense, not our false self, the ego, but our true self. We are the totality of God expressing as these individual forms. So you could say that. And why are we here? We're here to explore. We're here to become intimate with the creation, which happens from within us, and to tactile, to sense, to feel, to touch, to smell, to taste, to see, to hear, to engage our physical senses in this narrow little band of experience we call the physical world. And it's been proven, this is mainstream science. We can prove that we are spiritual beings. It's very easy to do that because we have this little narrow band of light called the light spectrum, the visible light spectrum between infrared and ultraviolet. But we know that these vast realms of frequencies above and below the visible spectrum exist. I put this in my very first book, the light spectrum. And so we have tangible proof that we only see a tiny fraction of what's actually there. And we don't even see it the way it actually is. We see it the way the light reflects on our retina and then gets decoded by the brain and then projected as an image. So we're never actually looking at what's in front of us. We're just looking at an interpretation by our brains based on the speed of light and various other factors. So we're always looking into the past when we're looking with our physical eyes at something. And we have agreements. So this is a table, this is a chair, and we all agree on that, and it makes our functioning in society work. But we're not seeing what's actually there. The world is not an illusion, but the way we perceive it is an illusion. And that's an important distinction to make, because there's a lot of teachings that say, oh, this world's not real. Yeah, it's real, but it's just vibrating energy. It's not really solid. It doesn't really have an existence apart from us. It's included within the creation, which is within us. So you could say there's nothing actually outside of us. And again, that's a hard concept for us to grasp. So I don't want to get too deep down the philosophical rabbit hole here. So
yeah, but it helps. It's a good start. Yeah, first I guess the all answers will come like gradually. People first have to ask themselves, who am I? I mean, who am I not? And then from that,
right,
it goes
we
on.
start to detach from the matrix. Oh,
Yes.
you mean my life is not about getting a better house or a better
Yeah.
car than neighbor? You know, I mean, this is basic stuff, but a lot of people are trapped there. Just go on any social
Yes.
media mainstream site and look at the garbage that most people are trapped in.
Yeah, and so much suffering around it, so much drama, and I mean, what can you do? You wrote in your books a lot about dimensions, about densities, about the levels of existence. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, we live in a base 12 universe. That means there's 12 dimensions in this local universe, conveniently delineated in my books. And just like we have 12 months in our Julian calendar, and there's a lot of 12s that come up in nature. You'll read about the divisions of the soul in the book Soul Integration, how the souls divide into 12 divisions. They have instead of cellular division biologically, where one cell splits into two and two split into four. That's a base 2 system, our biology. This is a base 12 system at the macro level. And so we have these 12 dimensions, and I've categorized them into the 6 lower levels and the 6 higher levels. Now, this corresponds roughly to the 4 lower levels in a lot of the Eastern teachings, what's called Maya, illusion, Lila, the worlds of duality, the realms of duality. There's actually 6 of them in my teachings, and there's 4 in some other teachings. Then there's 6 higher levels, which really aren't 6 in discrete individual levels. They're really just ways that our lower self can try to grasp a sense of what's in the higher realms. So we give them various names. The 3 most well-known are the soul, oversoul, and monad, which are levels 7, 8, and 9 of our being. And then there's 3 God levels above there. There is an interesting teaching called Ekankar, which has a diagram similar to what my guides and I have put forth. And it has a similar thing where you have God worlds, and then you have like the celestial worlds and things like that. And even theta healing and a few other systems talk about the pearly levels and things like that. So originally I had 7 levels, which makes sense from a worldly perspective, that we have 6 levels here plus a creator level, cosmic consciousness, as Ken Kaiser would call it. But I kind of differentiated it further into 12 levels, which is a little bit closer to how the universe actually, the building blocks of the universe actually work with 12s. So we have the physical, emotional, mental, those are the gross bodies. Then we have the subtle bodies, which are 4, 5, and 6, the astral, etheric, and causal bodies. Then we have the 7, 8, and 9, soul, oversoul, and monad, and then 10, 11, and 12, which I call the God levels, for lack of a better name, because you can't really define the levels above 9 adequately. They're beyond our capabilities at present to understand, but we know that they are there. We can feel them within us if we go deep enough into meditation.
And what about the densities and the dimensions?
Yeah, densities and dimensions, we kind of differentiate between densities and dimensions. Density is a level of vibration. Dimension is a realm of existence. And you can have beings vibrating at a higher or lower density than the dimension in which they're living. And that's what we have on Earth. This is a 4th dimensional world, but we have beings vibrating at 3rd, 4th, and 5th densities within this 4th dimension. So there is a difference between density and dimension, and I do go into that a little bit in some of the earlier books.
So what is, for example, the life in 5D or 6D looks like? Have you ever been
Well,
there in your journeys?
oh, yes. Level 5 is what we call the crystal light body. It's a silicon-based body of light. It looks very crystalline. Silicon dioxide is a crystal, form of crystal. And so it's similar to the silicon dioxide crystals that you see, that you can hold a quartz crystal in your hand. So this is a biological form that has been converted into a crystalline matrix. And it's our next level of evolution. I have ascension workshops where we talk about how to access our level 5 etheric crystal light body, which is already present in non-local time. All of these 12 dimensions are present right now, but many of them have not been activated. So what does it mean to be activated? It means giving your time, energy, focus, and attention to a particular realm until it becomes manifest in your life or manifest in the world, as the case may be. So this is not new information. This is basic metaphysics. Whatever you put your time, energy, focus, and attention to tends to manifest. And so if you focus continually on ascension, you are going to manifest your crystal light body. You still may have to do the deep work on yourself in order to get there. And the more you go deeper into the nature of your higher self, the more you'll have to dig deep into the subconscious and remove all of the belief systems that are standing in the way of moving forward into your crystal light body. So this is the work that we talk a lot about in the workshops or in seminars. So then you have level 6, which is the causal body. And level 6 dimensionally represents the causal planes. And this is where the Merkaba vehicle of light gets activated. You've heard a lot, many people have heard a lot about the Merkaba or Merkaba, as some people call it. And it's really your 6th density causal body fully activated. And it actually forms a matrix around your lower bodies that theoretically allows you to travel through space without the need for a spaceship, although you have to be really physically at level 6 to be able to do that. And right now there's just a handful of souls that have reached level 5 in the physical, about 50, less than 100. I was between 50 and 100 souls on Earth that have reached level 5 physically. Now, consciousness, we can go anywhere in consciousness. We can go all the way up to level 12 in consciousness and still have a level 4 body, which explains why a lot of yogis and sages and mystics in the Himalayan mountains, for example, they may leave their bodies at some point, just lay them aside and go into the higher realms. But they may be in a very high state while they're still in a mortal body. There's a few that have immortalized their bodies, a few of the yogis. Some of them are well known, such as Babaji from Yogananda's teachings. And there's a few others, but mostly it's mid 4th density bodies with a very high consciousness in many of these teachers. So this is explained also in the books.
Thank you. Now let's come to this topic about history of planet Earth. You have a book about it, which we also have in our Atma web shop. So if you want to know more, buy it. True history of planet Earth. Can you tell us more about that, and also about other beings in the universe? You said about Arcturians and stuff. So can you say a little bit more?
Yeah, let me give you the short version of the history. This planet it has been here about 4.5 billion years. The scientists are in agreement on that. And it did gradually cool to the point where various beings could come here. The story of how life began is not accurate. It didn't just happen that a certain chemical formula happened and the amoeba was born or something like that. No, the life itself, and this is a very complicated process from a human point of view, starts as what are called DNA codes and keys in the higher dimensions. And these codes and keys are then translated down through the levels of vibration until they reach these lower dimensions, in this case, the third dimension, which is the primordial earth. And so life was seeded here, basically. Now, humanoid life began in the Lyra Vega star system about 900 million years ago. That's this form with a torso and legs and feet and arms and hands and so on. Various forms of humanoid were developed by genetic engineering from the higher ups. The beings in the higher levels engineered these humanoid forms because they wanted a vehicle that could explore the lower dimensions' tactile senses, really get immersed into the lower dimensions to really feel the lower dimensions. And so that's how this body was created. It was created by what we call creator gods, which are beings that are very, very close to God, we could say. That's not accurate, but that's as close as we can come.
Like devas, like demigods, devas,
like Lord Krishna, like Lord Shiva, the various very high beings that came in and engineered the DNA, permutated the DNA to create these hominid or humanoid forms. And that started in a star called Vega in the constellation of Lyra, however you want to pronounce it. And later they migrated to the Pleiades. You notice there's all these bright blue-white stars in the Pleiades. Those are young stars. Some of them are only 1 billion years old, which is young for a star. And so once the planets cooled and became sufficient, many of them migrated to the Pleiades system from the Vega system. I think that's just one star with a couple of planets, inhabitable planets. And here we have in Pleiades about 100 stars, not just the 7 sisters that are at the center of the Pleiadian cluster, but about 100 other stars as well. And over 1,000 planets in the Pleiades system. So this was a great place to migrate to. So the beings who started incarnating in Lyra Vega eventually started incarnating in Pleiades or reincarnating in Pleiades. So most of us have had a lot of lifetimes in Pleiades. Homo sapiens, modern day humans, the origin is Pleiades, about 100 million years ago. So you notice there's a big gap there. There's 800 million years where other things were going on, which we're not going to get into. It takes too long to talk about that. But let's suffice to say that our modern day human form began about 100 million years ago in Pleiades, and then they colonized the Earth. They brought various groups of Pleiadians here to interbreed and put in colonies, learn how to grow food in this particular environment with these particular gases and gravity and everything. And so they did a lot of experimentation, and it wasn't until about 10 million years ago that an actual thriving civilization became manifest on Earth, which is called the land of Pan or Pangea. It goes by various names. And this was the before the continents separated, as you can read in mythology. And there was a flood, and we could go into the nature of the flood and why it occurred, but it has to do with something called the precession of the axis, or precession of the equinox. There's different names for it. It's basically something that happens about every 26,000 years. It's in the Mayan calendar, and there's various teachers that talk about the precession of the equinox. And so it's usually a natural event such as that. It can also be extraterrestrials interfering with the evolution of the humanoid species. That's another thing that it's talked about in the books. I'm trying to make this as succinct as possible with our limited time frame we have here.
Yeah, of course. I understand.
That's why we have the books. We get to go into a lot more detail. So let's spring forward now to Lemuria and then Atlantis. There were 2 periods of Lemuria and 2 periods of Atlantis, and they were both destroyed in floods. just as Pan was eventually destroyed in a flood when the continents separated, which was partly natural and partly unnatural, which we don't go into in great depth even in the books, but maybe at some point we'll go into more depth on what actually happened there. Right now, it's irrelevant whether it was a natural phenomenon or whether it was, caused or catalyzed by extraterrestrials, associated with the Earth, which brings us to the topic of extraterrestrials associated with the Earth. There have been about 23 different extraterrestrial races that have interacted directly with humanity or interbred with humanity, as the case may be. Some of this is even in the Bible, where they talk about the daughters of men and the sons of God, the sons of man, the giants, Genesis, I think it's chapter 18 or wherever. So there is a little bits and pieces that they didn't edit out of the Bible. They tried to get all there's reincarnation in the Bible about 3 or 4 times that they didn't catch. They didn't edit that out. And there's just a lot of little things. The Garden of Eden is an allegory. It's a story that represents the descent into the lower worlds. The soul planes, level 7 and above, are Eden or paradise, the Garden of Eden. And when the soul comes into the lower worlds, there's a tendency to forget the connection to the higher realms. It's one of the phenomena that occurs when you densify into a physical form, that it's such an intense experience that your life is dominated by your physical senses, just as it is for most of us now on the Earth. Most of us are dominated by our physical senses. And so we have a tendency to forget where we came from and who we really are. So that's the descent, the fall, the original cause. And then the original sin is the belief that somehow we're guilty and God is punishing us, which is an error in thinking. It has no ultimate truth to it. The idea that we did something wrong, that's a concept. And all we did was we got immersed in our experience, just like putting on a virtual reality headset. I know somebody who broke his legs because he was so convinced that what he saw in front of him was real that he reacted and it broke his legs. We can really make this matrix appear so real. Just ask the people in a war zone if this matrix is real.
Yes.
It seems real to them.
Yes,
so anyway, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit here, covering a lot of bases. Getting back to the ETs, there are several ET races which dominate our DNA. Pleiadian is probably the one which is most relevant to those of us who are in this event, because most of the beings that are really working on themselves, that are really breaking out of the matrix, have a lot of Pleiadian DNA. Now, the other 2 big ones are Sirius and Orion. And a lot of the more warrior-like aggressive energies are from Orion. And the Orions basically invaded and took over humanity a couple times in the past. There's an event called the Luciferian Rebellion, which is really about Orions coming in and interbreeding with the Pleiadian humans and diluting the Pleiadian human stock into a more aggressive warrior-like energy. I'm exaggerating a little bit and generalizing a little bit, but this is essentially what people call human nature, this fighting for scraps of food, type of mentality, I, me, mine, egotistical, selfish mentality.
Survival of the fittest.
Or survival of the fittest, the whole Darwin thing. And Darwin was not entirely wrong, but he didn't see the big picture.
Yeah.
He was immersed in the biological process, which has validity on this plane, but he couldn't see that we are spiritual beings that immersed ourselves into the biology in order to have this experience. That part got by Darwin. So anyway, the Orions have a lot to do with the warrior-like aggressive energies of so many humans. And then the Syrians brought the hierarchy systems to the Earth. the pyramidal hierarchy, where there's a few people at the top of the pyramid controlling everybody in the lower levels of the pyramid. This was a Sirius A concept from the Sirius A star system. And this came through the Nephilim and the Anunnaki, which was Sirius C star system, and Sirius B was kind of in between. And so you have, these beings, they call them archons or Nephilim or Anunnaki or different names. They were beings from the Sirius star system who brought the hierarchical structure to planet Earth. Incidentally, they did not build the Great Pyramid. They built some of the pyramids, but not the Great Pyramid. It was actually built by the Pleiadians. And that's a whole other story. The Sphinx was built by the Syrians. And so they brought this pyramidal structure, not literal pyramid, but a few people at the top controlling everybody down below. So the modern day Illuminati or the modern day dark cabal, power elite, whatever you want to call them, originated from the Syrians when they came to the Earth. So these are the major players. You have also the Dracos, and you have the Zeta Reticulans and various other groups that have interacted with Earth. And then you have the higher beings like Arcturians. You also have the Andromedans who've come here, and there are altogether about 23 different groups that have shaped the history of humanity.
That's so interesting. Okay, so we are now on this Earth, as we are. We can see a lot of destructive activity going on. Pandemics, wars, like they even talking about a new pandemic, even if still is not here. So what is the bigger picture behind all of these events which are going on now on this planet?
Well, it's actually quite complex. And what makes it complex is the level of interference that is allowed or permitted on the Earth, which sounds like a simple enough concept, but if you really go deep into it, it's a very advanced and complex topic. You have beings, which we call creator gods, which in a way are sort of responsible for the human experiment. I know that's a loaded word to say human experiment, but in a way it is. We've been laboratory rats to some degree, our human selves. And so you have these higher beings which are kind of monitoring what's happening here and only intervening in extraordinary circumstances, such as they will prevent nuclear war to keep the planet from being completely destroyed. And there's a story behind that. It's in the books. We call these divine dispensations, where the Godhead issues a decree saying, okay, we're not going to blow up any more planets like we did Maldek. We're not going to destroy the atmosphere of any more planets like we did Mars. We're going to allow limited warfare because a lot of souls on Earth want to learn about war. And so we're not going to deprive them of these soul lessons of war. So parts of the Earth are going to have wars for the immediate future, not the long-term future. That's another story. But in the immediate future, we're still allowing conventional warfare. The chemical weapons and electromagnetic weapons are being carefully monitored by the creator gods as well, through one of the organizations that work for them called Galactic Federation or Galactic Confederation, which is just a consortium of extraterrestrials from different star systems who are working together to help humanity. And, they range from 4th density all the way up to 9th density in vibration. This is why you get some Galactic Federation that are not doing good work and others that are. If you read the various channelings from the Galactic Federation, some of them are violating human free will because they're 4th density souls that don't know better. And this is an issue that is being addressed in the councils of the higher beings in the Galactic Federation. That's a whole other story. But anyway, they are involved also in preventing, well, they do things like neutralize the launch codes on the nuclear weapons. This is documented in the military logbooks. This saucer came and hovered over our missile silo, and our launch codes got completely trashed. Our operating system got corrupted or whatever. this is in the actual logbooks that the military commanders have written, documenting what happened and things like that. So we have physical proof that they're actually intervening in things like nuclear war, not allowing nuclear war to happen and things like that. They say it would have happened at least 5 times by now if they hadn't intervened. So that's a sobering thought in a way. So anyway, so they are assisting. And then let's see, I'm trying to do this in the time we have. I don't want to recreate the entire books here in this.
Sure.
But there are a lot of parts that you can fill in some of the missing pieces by reading not only the real history of the Earth, but also the earlier book, Earth Changes and Beyond, and Earth Awakens. Those 2 earlier books. You can also read about some of the interactions of the various extraterrestrial groups. And then you have the depopulation agenda, which is a very small group of souls. It's a microcosm of the dark cabal, if you want to use that phrase. Most of the power elite or dark cabal want the population to keep increasing on Earth, because that's more and more consumers buying more and more things, which create greater and greater profits for these big banks and big corporations. But you have a tiny percentage who want to decrease the population because human beings are easier to control if their numbers are lower. And so some of these are based in the Orion system, the Rigel star system in Orion, and they are reptilians, green scaly reptilian beings. Then you also have some serpent-like beings from the Draco star system that are also wanting to control and enslave humanity, and a few of the dark Syrians that want to enslave and control humanity. And some of them do form alliances, and they work together on various aspects. If I help you with this, will you help me with that? A lot of the AI technology is being, quote, controlled. I put that in quotes because it's not truly being controlled, but it seems to be being controlled by the negative extraterrestrials. And the idea of turning humans into machines, the Orions and Dracos are the ones behind the push for transhuman agendas and things like that. So it gets complex and complicated, as I warned earlier when you asked the question. But we can see these various factions playing out. Now, what's happening is people are waking up. Are they waking up fast enough to prevent a lot of the prophecies from coming true? Well, probably not. It's still the original prophecies that I brought forth, which one of the prophecies is that 3/4 of humanity will eventually die off. That seems to still be happening. And there are catalysts, certain biological agents, viruses, vaccines, various methods of delivery, GMOs, electromagnetic radiation from phone towers and things like that. These are catalysts for the mutation of DNA in a way that destroys fertility, for example, or creates cancers, aggressive cancers. There's just different ways that these things manifest in the human biological organisms. So yeah, this is happening. The solution is obvious. Raise your vibration. Once you raise your vibration above a certain point, you're no longer susceptible to these negative, invasive factors. My partner and I traveled not as extensively during COVID as we did before and after, but nevertheless, we barely let COVID slow us down in the things we've been doing. And aside from an occasional, 2 days of dry throat or something like that, we never experienced anything really during the entire thing, even with traveling to different countries. I literally walked across the border from Serbia to Croatia twice during the lockdowns because I couldn't fly across. So, things like that. but yeah, you can put yourself in a state of consciousness where you're not affected by these things. And by the way, viruses don't kill people. A failed immune system kills people.
Yes, I agree.
I probably shouldn't be talking about this depending on what formats this program is going to be on. I mentioned these things in one interview that went to YouTube, and YouTube shut it down. You can edit out this part if you need to.
Yeah, okay. We will see. I think they are getting a little bit more soft on these topics because everything is coming out now. Okay, so what do your spirit guides say? What's going to happen in next few years? Do you have some information about that?
Well, the so-called dark forces, the so-called power elite. I like to put so-called in front of it because I don't see them as powerful beings at all. I see them as locked into false power, because true power does not need to control or manipulate other souls. If you are truly in your power, why would you need to control or manipulate anyone? It's irrelevant. But if you're in this false power, the ego, then you have this deep insecurity, and so you need to control everybody around you in order to feel powerful. It's a false sense of power. And so the so-called power elite, their time is coming to an end, absolutely coming to an end. And when you have a cornered animal, that's a dangerous animal. When you are being exposed for your wicked ways, so to speak, you're dangerous. And you see this right now happening, where the so-called powers that be are no longer playing nice. They're no longer in the shadows trying to manipulate everybody. They're like, they've been exposed, and they're like a vicious animal that's been cornered. And so they're very dangerous right now from a human point of view. From a higher point of view, it's an illusion, but from a human point of view, they seem to be able to cause a lot of death and destruction. And so they are trying to create World War III. Right now, the Western forces are trying to pin some recent military activities on the country of Iran.
Yes,
it's long been figured that Iran would be where a third world war would start if it's going to happen. My guides have said for the last 20 years that the chances of a third world war are somewhere between 50 and 70%. In recent years, it's been about 55%, which is a little bit more promising. There was a greater chance 10 years ago than there is now of a third world war, despite all the things that are going on. And this is because so many people are waking up to the real issue, which is this Sirius star system-based pyramidal hierarchy of control, and these beings not wanting to give up their position near the top of the pyramid, and therefore trying to divide the people among themselves, get them pitting one tribe against another, one political class against another, one religion against another, one ethnic group against another, one race against another. All of this divide and conquer mentality is being instigated by a few beings near the top of the pyramid, ultimately extraterrestrials at the very top of the pyramid. But then as you come down the pyramid from the Sirius A star system, you come to what we would call, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the George Soroses, the Bill Gates, the Klaus Schwabs, these types of beings, that kind of are, what's the phrase, supranatural, national. They don't belong to any particular country. They're kind of outside of the organization of countries on the planet. And so they're kind of at maybe the third run down on the pyramid. They're not at the very top. They're the most visible ones in this so-called dark cabal, but they're not the ones that are really pulling the strings. It's like the puppet masters have strings on them from their puppet masters and so on going up the pyramid. So it's good to see all of this. It's not a good idea to get too immersed in it to the point where all you think about is the dark cabal and all that. But it's good to be aware of this because we are exposing it. Collectively, we're exposing this system that has been operating here ever since the Syrians first came to Earth, what, 300,000 years ago, or whenever the first group of beings from Sirius A arrived. Of course, we know about Sumeria and we know about ancient Egypt, and their presence in those cultures. But they were here way before even Lemuria was here. And then the Dracos came in also at various times. And the Dracos and the Syrians formed alliances, and then the Orions came in about 500,000 years ago, actually before the Syrians did. And so we have Syrian-Orion alliances as well. A lot of the Middle Eastern people are dominated by both Sirius and Orion energies. So, again, I'm getting a little scattered here. Let's go back to your questions.
That is so interesting. I mean, how much are these Sirius and Orion types ingrained in the world religion, into religious institutions? And whom actually these people, I don't know, worshipping when they say it's God, like Yahweh, like, I don't know, Jesus, Allah, Krishna? Are these like extraterrestrials or like creator God? What do you think?
Well, it's all of the above, really. There's a lot of, Jehovah was a seventh density Sirian from the Sirius A star system, full of ego, really let his dominance, technological superiority get to him, make him, oh, I'm so powerful over these helpless little humans because I have this advanced technology I brought with me, blah, blah, blah. And so if you read the Old Testament, it's the most violent book I've ever read.
Yes.
The most bloody. I mean, pregnant women having their bellies ripped out,
yes.
Things like that. And obviously, if you go even a little bit into it, you can see that the God of the New Testament is very different than the God of the Old Testament. And so the Syrians had a lot of influence in the Old Testament, the Jewish faith, the Hebrews. The ancient Hebrew alphabet is actually based on the DNA keys and codes that I mentioned earlier. There's a book called The Keys of Enoch by J.J. Hurtak, which goes into the sacred fire letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Excuse me. I'm talking a lot here. And so there is some on the Kabbalah. There's a lot of this ancient tradition from the Old Testament times that is valid mystery school information, esoteric information. But like all of the other esoteric systems, including the teachings of Jesus, it all got corrupted as it got passed from generation to generation. And now modern Judaism and Hebrew scholar, they really don't have access to the true esoteric knowledge that occurred, back at the time, because the Syrians, even though Yahweh or Jehovah was egotistical, angry, jealous God, nevertheless there was a lot of advanced esoteric information that the Syrians brought here. And the Anunnaki, when they came in, they brought some more of this information, because they weren't all good guys or all bad guys. Imagine you're an extraterrestrial, young, inexperienced extraterrestrial, and you're visiting Earth for the first time, and you ask your superiors as you're approaching Earth, humans, are they good guys or bad guys? Well, all of the above. Depending on which ones you interact with,
yes.
They're going to try and shoot you when you land.
It's individual.
Prostrate at your feet and consider you gods, and both have happened in history, as we know. And then the ones that do prostrate in front of you, it's like, oh, this sounds great. I can control these people. I can be a god to these people. Yeah. I can be, and that's kind of how Jehovah.
Yeah. Give them commands.
But they did have some esoteric knowledge. They couldn't have come to Earth in their starships if they didn't have some higher knowledge of how to navigate the cosmos and things like that. So you will find some truth in the ancient Hebrew teachings, the Kabbalah, the mysticism, all of that. And but then again, it gets corrupted by the time you get to what the Talmud and the Torah and the Quran in Islam and these different scriptures and the Holy Bible in Christianity. There's a lot of distortion in these scriptures, and it's because the duality of the lower dimensions starts to take over. Once these beings have been here a while, they start to take on the lower frequencies. This is the fall from grace, as it's called in the Bible. And so they didn't come in thinking, oh, I'm going to become egotistical and want to control everybody and be the top dog on the pyramid. They didn't come in thinking that. But that's what ended up happening as they fell in vibration, as they became more attuned to the electromagnetic fields of the earth. And that's a whole other story about the ascension of the earth, which may be in the questions. We should stay with the questions so we can get through as many of them
it's too much. Yeah. Okay, let's go on to this question about Matrix and Maya. I mean, in Vedas, they say Maya. I mean, how do we overcome this? Because we cannot, I don't know, for example, go to Himalayas and meditate all day, or, take time and, be still and do all kinds of spiritual practices. How can a person who is like mostly spending his days in like taking care of the family and working and actually reach this higher state of consciousness, to reach the point where he is transcending this Maya, this Matrix? What is the best spiritual practice for today's age? For this age?
It's not easy. And in times past, if you wanted to lead a spiritual life, you joined a monastery or an ashram or a temple, and you renounced your earthly possessions, and you didn't do family and business. If you were going to do spirituality, they were considered incompatible. And now we're more advanced, and many of us are able to juggle business and family and spirituality where it would have been impossible in the past, partly due to the fact that we have more leisure time due to our technology. Many of us can push a few buttons on our computer and somebody can deliver food to our door. Now, that's a relatively new technology on the earth, at least in this particular civilization. And so we have time to immerse ourselves in metaphysics and esoterics and try different forms of meditation and yoga and breathing and things like this. And so we're able to disengage, do some business and then meditate for a while after doing some business, instead of working the fields from sun up till sundown in order to put enough food on the table. You didn't really have time to meditate when you're loading bales of hay on the back of a wagon, things like that. So many of our ancestors who went through the pre-technology experience, their lives were completely dominated by physical survival, and they didn't have time to contemplate many of these things. Most of the scholars from times past, Plato, Socrates, they either came from wealthy families or they inherited something, or their lives were set up in such a way that they were able to have the time to contemplate the deeper mysteries, whereas most people were too busy trying to catch fish or whatever their occupation was. Of course, there's the story of Jesus with the fisherman, which is a prime example of that. It's like, what do you mean, sell all you have and follow me? That was kind of an interesting, I don't know how much of that's actually true, but it's bringing up an interesting point, that up until recently, we didn't have the luxury of doing business and family and spirituality all at the same time in the same lifetime. So it is difficult, and you do have to make time for your personal growth. It's so easy to get caught up in the drama of the day. Oh, so-and-so bombed so-and-so, or, this is happening, or this economic problem is happening, or this, whatever it is. And you have to step back from the Maya. Maya, illusion, duality just means that you have forgotten who you really are, that we are extensions of God, and therefore the attributes of God, which have no opposites. If God is all-encompassing, how can there be an opposite to all-encompassing? The idea is meaningless. So therefore, if you're in fear, you have descended into the realm of Maya or illusion because you are believing that fear is a real force in the universe that can somehow oppose God, or call it Satan, the devil, Lucifer, whatever you want to call it, that there's a force that opposes God. That's an idea. It's a state of consciousness where you believe that there's a force that opposes God. And so when you believe that, you descend into Maya or illusion. And so the way out is to recognize there is no opposite to God's love. It's everywhere present. It's in every cell, every atom, every molecule of creation, continuously without a break. And so therefore, it has no opposite. And once you realize there's no opposite to God, then you're outside of the duality. You've transcended the duality. You've expanded your consciousness outside the little bubble of duality that's contained within the non-duality, which is much vaster realm.
That's very, very good definition. I mean, we can say that this devil or Satan, as the Christians like to say, it's ignorance. It's like our forgetfulness about our godly nature. That is the Satan.
Yeah. There's ignorance. There's willful ignorance, which means, I know there's something beyond this, but I refuse to look at it because I'm so attached to my material comforts or pleasures. That's willful ignorance. And then there's the natural ignorance, which is like the child that wants to be taught. Oh, I want to know the secrets of the universe. I don't know, and I want to be taught, which is a humility. It's a much higher state than the willful ignorance of don't bother me with that spiritual stuff. I'm too busy making money or whatever, however it manifests.
Yeah. I don't have time for this. Okay, let's talk about your books, Integration of the Soul, and let's talk about Ascension also. What is the fragmentation of the soul? How is it possible that the soul can be fragmented? And what can we do about this condition? And also, what is Ascension? How can we speed up the process?
Well, ultimately, the soul cannot be fragmented. It's a concept more than anything. What it looks like clairvoyantly is little packets of energy which are connected by golden threads to what we call the parent part of the soul. So it would be like extending little pieces of yourself into different realities and exploring those. And so we have what's called soul extensions, which are essentially incarnations, where a part of you has extended itself from the higher dimensions down into the lower dimensions in order to have an experience of the lower dimensions. But you're not really separate from your parent part, which is in level 7, the soul planes, which is also connected to the oversoul, monad, and God realms. So it's not really separate, but we call it fragments when it forgets that it's connected, when it becomes immersed in a traumatic experience where it seems to forget that it's part of a glorious whole, because it's so wrapped up in a traumatic experience, such as violence or deep sexual passion with attachment to the object of the sexual passion, or some other traumatic experience like a traumatic loss. The child loses the mother at the age of 2 or something like that. So these traumatic experiences impact the soul, and a part of the soul becomes preoccupied with those traumatic experiences and forgets that it's part of a glorious whole. So we call that soul fragmentation. So you have extension, which is incarnation, and then once you're incarnated, you have fragmentation, which can occur at any time throughout the life of the extended soul or incarnated soul. And so if you're fragmented to a certain degree, your vibration drops, and you're not able to get back into the higher realms when you leave your body. And so you would become an astral fragment wandering around in the astral planes. And this is where ghosts and poltergeists and hauntings and stuff occur, is through these fragmented souls that are wandering around lost and confused in the astral planes. Once you get to a certain point in your evolution, you're able to keep yourself integrated enough to go to the etheric planes rather than the astral planes when you leave your body. And eventually you can even go to the causal planes when you leave your body. If you go all the way back to level 7 when you leave your body and you reunite your fragments and extension with your parent part, then that's called spiritual ascension. Physical ascension is where you have enough integration to be able to take your physical body directly into the light without going through the death process. And that's physical ascension, which is much more difficult to attain. And only a handful of souls, between 50 and 100 souls, have attained physical ascension throughout the history of humanity. Millions of souls have attained spiritual ascension. And this is the true meaning of dying and going to heaven. The true heavens are the celestial planes, levels 7, 8, and 9. And most souls do not die and go to heaven. They die and go to the astral planes or the etheric planes. They're still on the wheel of karma or the wheel of reincarnation because they didn't resolve their soul lessons sufficiently to get off the wheel of karma. And they had so many traumas and fragmentations that they weren't able to go to a higher vibration. Typically, you go up one level when you die. So the third density humans go to the astral planes. The fourth density humans go to the etheric planes, etc. You know, they go up one level between lifetimes. That's typically how it works.
Can they like degrade in the lower energies, lower dimensions, people?
Well, not really. I mean, you can descend into the lower planes and become totally immersed in the lower planes, and you can create a lot of negative karma for yourself in the lower planes, like murdering, raping, and pillaging. You know, creates a lot of negative karma. And then the guilt that you feel after behaving badly locks you into that negative karma, because that's what guilt does. So it can take a very long time for souls to extricate themselves from the purgatories, the hell. You know, hell is like the lower astral planes. It can take a very long time to get out of those states. Fortunately, we do have helpers, people that go into these lower realms and help pull people out. But it's difficult to do because they're so attached to the things which got them there in the first place. You know, the attack revenge is a good one. You know, I hate to pick on the Israelis and Palestinians, but, you know, this attack revenge, this is not unique to this lifetime. This has happened going on in multiple past lives where, you know, the Israelis in this lifetime may have been the Palestinians in a previous lifetime, things like that. And then, of course, it's more complex than that because you have the Israeli government and Hamas, which are the real instigators. And then you have the innocent Israeli people and the innocent Palestinian people, which, you know, when I say innocent, I mean innocent from a human perspective. They may have been involved in something in past lives as well. But the bottom line is love and compassion is the way out. You know, love and compassion for everyone, not taking sides and saying we're good and you're bad, but sending love and compassion to both sides in the conflicts. You know, that's the way out of the duality.
When we come to these celestial realms, are they eternal, or are they also like not eternal, and you come back to Earth eventually?
Well, levels 7 through 12, we could say are the real levels, and the levels 1 through 6 are the levels of Maya or illusion. And so when you're in the real levels, you're in eternity. You're in the realms beyond time and space, essentially. Although there is a sense of time and space in 7, 8, and 9 levels, but it's not like we know time. It's different, and it's more like you're looking in on the lower dimensions from the higher dimensions, and so you're aware of the dimensions of time and space, but you're not bound by them. That would be another way to say it. So eternity would be levels 7 and above. Levels 7 and above cannot be corrupted. If you're in those levels, you cannot be corrupted. If you're a 7th density soul and you come into the lower realms, you can be corrupted like Jehovah was.
Okay. Let's talk about DNA. How important is our DNA in this story, and what are the light codes and light keys? Some
Yeah,
people
well,
talk
do
about
you
that.
have about another 15 hours here we can go into that?
Ah!
DNA is the code for biological life. We all know that, and it can be manipulated to create different life forms. And you can eventually learn how to shape shift, which is at a very high level of consciousness. You learn how to shape shift yourself. You can reprogram your own DNA. We do that all the time on a minuscule level. Maybe you've heard of the work of Dr. Emoto with water molecules.
Yes.
And if you send love to a water molecule, it creates a beautiful crystalline structure. And if you send hate to it, it creates a chaotic structure. And our DNA is similar to that in many ways. We're 70% water, first of all. So our DNA is embedded within this watery substance we call the physical body. And so there's a direct correlation between the water molecules and the DNA molecules. You know, you'll find that they work together to help maintain this human life form. And so you can reprogram your DNA. And in fact, that's what you do in the Ascension material, where the Ascension activation meditations. You are essentially reprogramming your DNA. And so the keys, the light keys and codes are the building blocks of the DNA, which are precipitated down into form by the creator gods and those and their assistants when you're establishing a life form. And this was done for the hominids, the humanoids, various types of humanoids, and the hybrids as well. Some of this is done through interbreeding, which is kind of the natural way that DNA mutates. You have, like, let's say, the Pleiadians and the Syrians interbreed and create a Pleiadian-Syrian hybrid, which later becomes maybe Hathors or some other hybrid race. And you get a blending of the consciousness and a blending of the DNA at the intermediate levels of creation. At the higher levels, everything is God and it's changeless, eternal. But at the intermediate levels, you have these permutations of the DNA, which later result in a maybe a tall being that's taller than both of the precursors to the DNA. Let's say a 2 meter tall Syrian and a 1.5 meter tall Orion interbreed, and you get a 2.5 meter tall giant or something, maybe from that. So there's all these permutations of the DNA, but the light keys and codes are like the language of light, which tells the DNA how to configure itself. It tells the molecule how to configure the chromosomes, the genetic material, and all of that. And then, of course, now you have genetic scientists who are learning how to manipulate the various components of the DNA molecule in order to create alterations to the life form. This can be used in a very positive way to eradicate illness and create a super race of beings for everybody, not just the privileged few. But it can also be used negatively, and the idea of the privileged few or the chosen ones are somehow we're better than this race over here, so we're going to create a super race, which is what eugenics is, basically. It's the creating a super race and then eliminating the inferior races, which we all know about the Hitler and all that. So certainly it can be used for positive or negative, but this is a whole other subject right now because of DNA manipulation that's being done in laboratories. You're cloning, the whole AI thing is another facet. How does AI and DNA go together poorly, but things like that.
Yes, thank you. Let's talk about your timeline healing technique. It has become quite famous among people who work on themselves. Can you tell us more about the timelines and this technique? How is it possible that we can even heal our traumas from the past lives with it?
Well, timeline healing is based on quantum physics and specifically the non-locality principle of quantum physics. which basically states, if you do it with respect to space, it states that everything is interlinked or interconnected to everything else. If you do it with respect to time, it means that all time exists in this eternal now moment. So all of your traumas that you've experienced in this lifetime or in past lifetimes are occurring right now in non-local time. And therefore, you can access these traumas as they are unfolding and alter them. You can change your experience of any trauma you've ever experienced in any lifetime. Now, it gets a little bit complicated when you talk about time paradoxes, because it's not like you can go back and change the original timeline significantly, because that would violate the free will of other souls. It would deprive them of their soul lessons, and it would create potential paradoxes, such as the grandfather paradox. The grandfather paradox essentially says, what if you go back and accidentally kill your grandfather when you're traveling back in time? Well, that would mean that you were never born. But if you were never born, you couldn't have gone back and killed him in the first
Yeah.
place. So it's a paradox. And the way you resolve the paradox is by creating new timelines. So in timeline healing, what we do is we create new timelines. You still have the old timeline where nobody came to your rescue when you had a trauma. But in the new timeline, you went back and healed the trauma. So now every time you think about your past, you remember the healing that took place during that traumatic event. So it changes your DNA, it changes your consciousness, and you're no longer going to keep repeating the same mistakes as you go forward into the future, because you've changed the source of the negativity, negative programs, negative beliefs, negative thoughts that were associated with a traumatic event. So we go back in time and we give healing to our past selves, but we do it in very specific ways where we don't violate free will or time paradoxes. So it's not like reframing, which is a psychological technique where you pretend that your past happened differently than the way it actually happened in linear time. And it tricks your subconscious mind into letting go of certain traumas. But it's not a true healing. It's a temporary fix to get over a phobia, such as fear of public speaking or something like that. And I use examples in the training of how that is different than timeline healing. There's obviously a lot more to it, but we will have to, invite people to come to a level 1 training and experience it for yourself. It just takes, it's 16 hours of instruction. So it's typically a Friday night on a Saturday and Sunday, or it can just be a Saturday and Sunday with longer hours, and relatively inexpensive as workshops go. So
Yes.
that's probably the best way to experience it, is to attend a level 1 training. Then if you decide it's really the right technique for you, you can attend levels 2 and 3 and go on from there.
So we are coming to the last question, and usually my last question is, do you have some message for the viewers in this part of the world?
Yes, my number 1 message, and this is for all parts of the world, but especially for Central and Eastern Europe, is do not believe that you are powerless and helpless to do anything about the conditions in the world. This is the number 1 lesson, the number 1 soul lesson that souls need to learn right now. Well, there's 2. For those who've been working on themselves for a while, you are not helpless or powerless to change the world. You have immense power within you. You have the power of God within you. It only takes one enlightened being to change the planet. Just look at the Einsteins, the Teslas, the Mother Teresas, the Gandhis. They were, one person changed the course of humanity. And so never believe for 1 minute that you're powerless to change what's going on in the world. Start feeling like you're a little insignificant pawn on some power elite's chess game. No, that's an error in thinking, to think that you are powerless. And So that's, I would say, the big one. The corollary to that, which is a really big lesson for those who are just starting to wake up, is not to blindly trust outer authorities, whether they're religious authorities, medical authorities, educational authorities, media authorities, political authorities, economic authorities. Go within. Find the only one true authority, which is God, within. And, the whole COVID thing was a massive awakening of that soul lesson. Don't trust authorities. A lot of the even very well-meaning doctors gave out bad advice during COVID. And it's like, no, the lesson is trust your inner authority, withdraw your faith in the outer authorities. Doesn't mean don't listen to them. It doesn't mean don't learn from them, but do not blindly believe in outer authorities. So that's another big soul lesson that a lot of people have been painfully learning. And so those are the two really biggest lessons right now. And the other is recognize that you are this magnificent spiritual being. And I look forward to seeing many of you in the workshops that are going to be coming up later this year. We have the schedule in Serbia coming up in March, and we have later in the year, we'll have Croatia and other locations. We have Romania and Germany. We have Latvia as well coming up later in the year. So the schedule is not on my website yet. We're upgrading the website. We're changing the website, and we've gotten behind on the schedule a little bit. So check with your person that you've been in contact with, whether that's the organizers in Croatia or Serbia or other places, for the latest schedule.
Thank you, Sal. Allow me just a moment to give some information to our viewers in Croatian. Knjige Sal Rachele možete nabaviti u našem Atma web shopu, sve su prevedene na hrvatski u izdanju Harše. Link će biti u opisu ovog videa i u prikvačenom komentaru. Nabrojit ću samo naslove, znači to su jako, kao bi rekla, dugo godina već imamo te knjige i jako su dobro prodavane. Tajne neograničene energije, integracija duše, život na rubu dimenzija, zemljine promjene, proročanstvo, buđenje planeta Zemlje od 2012. do 2030. Prava, povijest, Zemlje i misterij vremena. To su tih 7 knjiga. Također želim napomenuti da uskoro kreće Salova proljetna evropska turneja u sklopu koje će posjetiti, kao što je rekao, i Rusiju, i Rumunjsku, Hrvatsku, Srbiju, Njemačku, Latviju, Armeniju. Ono što zasigurno znamo od datuma je da će biti u Beogradu od 23. ožujka do 17. travnja, gdje će održati dvodnevnu radionicu i kompletan tečaj sve 3 razine iscjeljivanja na vremenskoj liniji. Datume za Hrvatsku ćemo saznati naknadno, a biti će objavljeni u opisu ovog videa i na našem portalu Atma.hr. Naravno, više informacija o svim ovim događajima i kontakti će biti također u opisu ovog videa i prikvačenom komentaru. Svi događaji sa Salom će biti i uživo i online, tako da se možete u stvari uključiti bez obzira gdje ste. There you go. Sal, thank you very much for your time, for this wonderful conversation. I learned so many things from you. I hope to see you somewhere soon in person, and I wish you all the best in your life and in your mission.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And on behalf of my guides and my higher self, I wish to bless each and every one of you that is listening to this or watching this. Many blessings.
Thank you so much.